About the year 2044.
Yeah.
30 years from now. Do you, in your thinking about modeling systems into the future, are you really thinking in those types of terms? Are you thinking that far out? Because if you look even 30 years back, the kinds of things that have changed, where many of them were totally not predicted or not predictable.
Once in a while, I have the luxury of doing that. Most of my work now is funded by companies, and they're thinking in the 5 to 15 year period. But they are looking at major structural change in industries that are happening as a result of disruptive technologies. I do enjoy thinking about that, and one time was asked to talk about what the world would be like 100 years from now. But generally speaking, the big constant in all of this is people. Their needs, their desires, their wants, and the constant competitive advantage that everybody has shown who's been really successful, you know, from the person who's starting in a village with a bottom of the pyramid play in India to Steve Jobs here, is an understanding of people. And I think that that's probably the best answer I can give to you.
So just to take on the question another step, by the way, thank you for your talk. And companies like Facebook or many other companies, they can go out and acquire, they have money and so forth. But what about the nonprofit organization that's trying to do something about climate change? How can they apply this kind of...
Actually, I think that's a...
You don't want to necessarily think about exit, but...
No, I think that what you're talking about is something that I find a very important problem. I think the places where you see it successful are family-owned companies that don't necessarily become as big as M&M Mars. But the family-owned companies in Europe, they are still innovative. And so in your basic mission with a nonprofit, there are still many innovative new products that you can continue to deliver to people. And by product, I mean service or ways of doing things. Collaborations are also possible. The kind of growth that you expect from a for-profit company probably is not as characteristic of social entrepreneurship ventures. But what social entrepreneurship really brought into the picture was a consideration of sustainability, where you're trying to create a sustainable change. The organization sustainability tends to be thought of as second, but that's often just as important. Prior and outside of that, you have a lot of people doing social service providing who give of themselves incredibly unselfishly, but if they disappear, what they've done is not going to continue. And that's the big danger in the nonprofit sector. Thank you. Go ahead.
This will be the last question, sorry, but we have to keep moving right along. Thank you.
Yeah. The president of Gallup wrote a recent book in which he had done a study with regard to the issue that was at that time very current, and that is the way to solve the unemployment problem is innovation. And he took a very counter view. Over the period that he had studied, he found that innovation destroyed jobs, did not create jobs in the short term. In the long term, they may, but in the short term, they destroyed it. What's your reaction?
I think it's very possibly true, and that's one reason that big companies cannot implement disruptive innovations. A disruptive innovation, by definition, is going to disrupt some existing business. And that's precisely why it really didn't make sense for Apple Computer to develop consumer electronics like the iPod. Not only is it going to, especially lately, between the iPhone and the iPad had to eat into their laptop sales and partly into their telephone sales. So how does a company implement something disruptive? I do think that if you have a concern with keeping jobs in the same company, innovation's a scary thing. And that's one reason the Japanese cannot get an open innovation system. There is an inherent fluidity in the labor market that's required to have this kind of crazy startup-centric economy like we have in Silicon Valley. And people are very aware that one reason they select the job they select is what kind of job it will lead them to the next time they look. So I do think that I'm not sure on a macro level you're killing jobs. There's a lot of other kinds of things that I would have to say ought to be factored in. Are you really looking at a company? Are you looking at a country? In which case it may disrupt. It may drop the number of jobs in the short term. World jobs are likely to increase. And the really fundamental principle of economics is that it allows for more efficient reallocation of resources. If the jobs are killed, if they're lost by an innovation, maybe they go to an even, to something that's more appropriate. This is one reason I think that for the universities, the big opportunity now is to help grown-ups who have already gotten university degrees be competitive in the emerging markets. Short programs that people come back to school for and that kind of thing. So I do think it's a big concern. The other thing is you can't avoid it. I really don't think there's anything except innovation that remains a national competitive trait. Partly because if you can standardize something, a product or a process, it will go to someplace cheaper. And as your economy is successful, it gets more expensive. You can't standardize innovation because that's human risk-taking and creativity. But anyway, that's a great question. Thanks, everybody. Wish I could stay.
Thank you. A big round of applause. Thank you very much.